Open world, hundreds of hours of content, giant world maps. These are all the main traits of games that have come out in the past year, but I have to say, I just never really connected with it. In this video, I'm going to talk about some more standout linear games and talk about why I prefer that design over open world. Now, before I start talking about why I prefer more linear games, I think that necessitates a conversation about why I don't like open world games. So I'm just going to list a few of my issues that I have with them right now. The major one is ubiquity. Not only do they share the same genre, but most of the mechanics are also shared. Same fast travel, same combat with light, heavy, and situational attacks, same town hubs with merchants and side quests, same map exploration, same gathering that leads to the same crafting, same skill trees that delays more powerful attacks into the late game. These are all gameplay aspects that are shared between these games. And I'd argue it wasn't even an ideal gameplay to begin with. Dominance. This generation was unusually dominated by this genre. From early on with games like Watch Dogs, MGS5, Witcher 3, and Fallout 4, to the more modern day with Horizon Forbidden West and Assassin's Creed Valhalla, it seems like every AAA studio game fell back on this style, leading to my next complaint. Misplaced potential. A lot of good games were probably missed out because of this trend. Imagine if Horizon Zero Dawn was just a focused, refined action game, where the combat was more refined and you went from set piece to set piece on a grand adventure throughout this unique setting. Bleeding out. The RPG influences of these games also bled into other more linear games. Straight action games like Doom 2016 or adventure games like Tomb Raider and God of War had RPG and sub-secret gathering crowbarred in it to fit with the rest of them. There are some more issues that I can talk about, but I think this intro has gone on long enough. I'm also going to say that the masterpieces of this generation, the 10 out of 10s, the Elden Rings, the Breath of the Wilds, the Red Dead Redemptions 2, were all open world games. So it's not necessarily a problem I have with the genre itself, more of the games that have just been coming out with this genre. But I think I'm going to move this video along here. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is a big 6-letter word called linear games are often divided into chunks that last usually about an hour per section. This allows the pacing to really shine. I'm going to take a look at an example from one of my favorite games, Bill's Town in The Last of Us. Bill's section opens with you and Ellie first wandering into the town. We get introduced to traps at the start that can be used against the infected. We get some nice exploration and combat with optional areas that help build the characters. We get a new weapon here, the bow, and we get to test it out a bit. We get this ridiculously awesome set piece where you hang upside down and Joel has to fend off the infected. It looks dire until Bill comes and rescues you. We get introduced to Bill here, definitely one of the most interesting and entertaining characters in the whole game. We chat a bit, develop a plan, grab a shotgun and a new explosive, and off we go. We get a nice dynamic where Ellie and Bill are constantly arguing and Joel has to mediate them. We walk a bit with Bill where you explore a deserted suburban area with some absolutely beautiful art direction, going room to room in an empty house. I really like this part here where you read about the early days of the outbreak through the eyes of a child in his journal. After a short chase, we get the twist in the third act, where they get the car but they don't find the engine. It's followed by a quiet moment wandering an empty school that ends with a boss fight. We then find Bill's partner, who committed suicide. An interesting moment for sure that really fleshes out the dire, depressing world that these characters live in. We finally find a car and are ready to go. Joel and Ellie bond some more, and we get a unique chase moment where you escape the town while trying to start the car. We finally escape, get to pause, and relax for a few minutes. We then get a cutscene where we say our goodbyes to Bill, and we move on to the next episode. This is the beautiful loop of The Last of Us. This whole section is filled with new set pieces, a new character and location, quiet moments of somber with heightened moments of action cycling between each other. We get some twists and turns, we get a climax, and we get a short resolution. The best part about this is that this game keeps it up chapter after chapter after chapter. This whole process is then restarted immediately when we get to the next town and Joel and Ellie are ambushed by a gang. This whole hour of gameplay is handcrafted and paced to a T, something only a more linear game could offer. Think of a linear experience as a track on a roller coaster. You build tension at the right time, that tension gets released at the right time. Every loop and turn has their own purpose, short, up, down, and then it's over. Contrast that time management with some more open world games that are saddled with long stretches of moving from one spot to another, pointless time spent gathering and haggling with shopkeepers, awkward main story quests that invoke a lot of walking around and talking, no real sense about what's about to happen or what the next goal is. My point here in this video is that time to play video games is often quite limited. Playing The Last of Us really maximizes your time, or even for a 12-hour game, every minute serves an important narrative and gameplay purpose. Perfect pacing throughout, and it's why I still love this game to this day. We're gonna look at Bayonetta next. If you're unfamiliar with it, Bayonetta is an action game. And when I say action game, I mean it is balls to the walls, non-stop kicking, punching, and dodging. It is unapologetic about its design. Everything in this game, from its areas, its enemies, its chapters, its story, even its characters, are all in service of one goal: to prop up its action gameplay. There are no genre mixing here, no RPG subscreens, no running around collecting damage variation on weapons, no pointless gathering and crafting, no skill trees that arbitrarily make you stronger. It's all action from start to finish. There is this unbelievable set of combos that each have their own function and use in battle that can be whipped out at any time. It also has a very interesting way of approaching difficulty design. Bayonetta is a demanding game, where your inputs determine if you'll live or die. The first enemies are hard, but rather nimble and easy to read. The game then constantly, and I mean constantly, introduces new enemies, each with a unique set of attacks and design. There's also a variety of bosses that return more powerful than ever later in the game. Even on normal, it forces you to keep improving level by level as the enemies keep getting harder and harder. The interesting thing to note is that your punches and combos are not doing more damage as you progress. You're just better now. You're quicker with your inputs, better at reading the playing field, better at using the appropriate combats and stringing them together. By the end of the game, you are the unstable Witch of Time, battling a deity on top of the solar system. Clean difficulty design, whole stop. But it doesn't stop there, oh boy. You flip on hard mode and it's a completely different game. They start by throwing endgame enemies in the tutorial, and it doesn't let up. Instead of boringly increasing their attack damage and health, this mode has more powerful enemies, more versatile attacks, and their speed is nearly doubled. You're now playing the game twice as fast, forcing your inputs to pick up the pace. Not a single damage modifier in sight. It even keeps going with the next difficulty called Non-Stop Infinity Climax, which is exactly what it sounds. The true final test, the end game, the game's by far most enjoyable and by far most difficult mode. This is something you don't see in most open world games. Difficulty is usually tied to your player's level and current progression. Enemies are hard at first, but you collect some more powerful equipment, gain new armor and health boost, and now the game is easier. Struggling with a boss or enemy, just get some upgrades and come back later. Most of these games also don't flesh out their combat like Bayonetta does, meaning even the most skilled players in the world can't cut through harder enemies or even outright not take damage if they're good enough. The difficulty setting is another thing. Again, they are just health and damage boosts, probably the least interesting way of approaching a difficulty select. With the large game lengths of open world RPGs, it also discourages you from going for another play and really mastering the whole game. When I completed Bayonetta, I immediately went for a second playthrough on hard mode, and then I did it again with the final mode because its core gameplay is just that fun. I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is that linearity is focus. Bayonetta had one goal, its only purpose, its one thing that it prioritized above all else. It was to be the greatest action video game ever made, and it completely nailed that goal. Resident Evil 4. Still, to this day, is probably the best game that I've ever played. There's a lot I could talk about with this game. Its influence on the industry, how it popularized third-person action-adventure games, its endless replayability, but keeping with this video's theme, I'm gonna talk about how it uses its linear design to create a playable roller coaster for the player. When I was talking about The Last of Us, I talked about how its episodic nature allowed for an incredibly tight and varied hour-long play session. But with Resident Evil 4, it's a bit different. This game focuses on unique set pieces on a minute-to-minute base. From the opening village section to the ending chase off the island, every minute of this game is throwing you into some unique situation, and it's awesome. Before I start, I'm going to talk about the gameplay a bit. You got this super refined, high-impact combat with location-specific hitboxes, where Headshot gives you this awesome melee attack. You get a variety of weapons and gadgets, ranging from shotguns to long-range rifles. Enemies are intimidating, where one attack will leave you almost dead. They are also pretty slow moving, so there's a lot of moments where you really hold your breath trying to get that killing shot off. There is just this incredible tension in every conflict where you're always at the edge of your seat, always barely escaping danger. So we got this great cathartic, tense action gameplay that keeps your eyes peeled while the game is constantly throwing you into new situations. Let's take a look at the opening of this game. Before you even learn how to walk properly, they start throwing in crazy chainsaw men that one-shot you. We get this opening sandbox where you defend a village by yourself, almost like a proto-Nazi zombies. You're fighting a giant monster fish and then fighting a giant monster zombie. You're riding a ski lift while fending off enemies and protecting Ashley. You're wandering a graveyard at night full of traps. You get an awesome sandbox with this skyrise section, and it's just all so good, and it just keeps going. We storm a castle with catapults. You're fighting crazy blind zombies where you have to pay attention and defeat them using sound. We got this crazy fortress that throws every trap they can at you. You got these minecart roller coasters where enemies keep jumping on and you have to fend them off. We get this action set piece where a crazy demon car is chasing after you. We get all these incredibly scary looking bosses that require a lot more strategy and environmental use to defeat them. I hate to keep repeating this, but it's true. Literally every moment in this game is unique and memorable. Every room filled with a new tense action gameplay section. I could keep gushing about every minute of this game, but I think you all get the idea, and I'm gonna move this forward a little bit. This goes without saying, but all this could only be achieved through a linear design. The game designers made dozens upon dozens of fun set pieces, lined them all up, and you get this incredibly well-paced experience. You could throw a dart, pick any moment, any set piece, any subchapter, and it's gonna give you some of the best gameplay in all of the gameplay. It's focused on variety, it's incredibly fun and refined combat, it's tense and escalating difficulty curve, it's great pacing without a single boring or mishandled area. It all just clicks like clockwork. Easily one of the best experiences the medium has to offer. I got a couple more examples I can talk about. Dark Souls really incentivizes different play routes, making repeat playthroughs very engaging. Uncharted 4 takes a lot of cues from The Last of Us, with a well-paced, bombastic, globe-trotting adventure. I hope I was able to give some insight on why I prefer this type of design over open worlds. Linear games offer grand adventures. They're scary and tense. They keep me engaged with tight pacing. They have unique difficulty curves. They have incredible focus and refinement. And above all else, these games are fun. They make me happy, and it's why I enjoy playing them. Whew. Video done. Oh. If you guys have made it all the way through to the end here, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. I had a really nice time making this. As always, like and subscribe, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Take care.